The sky was a strange color that day, a mix of burning red and thick gray smoke. The alien war veteran stood on the ridge, his four eyes scanning the battlefield below. He had fought in more wars than he could remember, on planets where the ground boiled and on worlds where the air itself was poison. But this war was supposed to be different. This was meant to be the last great battle, the final strike that would end the long conflict. The Coalition had gathered its strongest armies, the best weapons from across a dozen worlds. He had been sent as an observer, a witness to history, not a fighter. His orders were simple: watch, record, and report. Among the many troops lined up in formation, he noticed a small human unit. They looked strange to him, their bodies covered in heavy armor, their faces hidden behind dark visors. Humans were a new addition to the Coalition, known for their adaptability but not for their numbers. He had heard stories about them, stories that made no sense, that they fought like predators, they could ignore pain, that they sometimes scared even their own allies. He dismissed those stories as battlefield exaggerations. Every soldier fought with courage when survival was on the line. The enemy appeared on the horizon, a wave of black armor and gleaming weapons, advancing in perfect, machine-like precision. Orders came through the Coalition lines to hold position until the signal. The veteran expected discipline from every species present, a coordinated and controlled strike. But when the signal came and the first shots rang out, something unexpected happened. The human unit did not simply fire from their positions. They broke forward. They charged. It was reckless, almost suicidal. The veteran cursed under his breath, expecting them to be cut down in seconds. But instead, the opposite happened. The enemy faltered. The precision of their advance broke. The humans moved fast, weaving through incoming fire, their rifles spitting bursts of light. One of them tackled an enemy soldier to the ground, stabbing through armor with a blade instead of using a gun. Another kept firing even after taking a direct hit to the shoulder, not slowing down for a second. The veteran felt a cold chill spread through his chest. This was not the kind of battle style he knew. This was not discipline. This was something else. The enemy commander shouted orders, trying to reform the lines. But the humans were already inside their formation, breaking it apart from within. The rest of the Coalition advanced in confusion, unsure whether to follow the humans or stick to the original plan. The veteran watched as one human, larger than the rest, stood his ground against three attackers at once. His armor was dented, his weapon overheated, yet he kept swinging his rifle like a club. Every movement was brutal and efficient, like an animal cornered but determined to kill before dying. And then the veteran noticed something even more disturbing. The human was smiling. Not a smile of joy or arrogance, but something sharp, almost hungry. When the dust began to settle, the Coalition had taken the field, but it had not been because of the plan. It had been because the humans refused to stop moving forward, refused to give the enemy time to think. As medics rushed to tend the wounded, the veteran walked down from the ridge to see the humans up close. They were covered in blood, both theirs and the enemy's, but they did not seem tired. Their eyes, visible now through cracked visors, were clear and focused. One of them was laughing quietly with another, as if they had just come from a training exercise instead of a life-or-death battle. The veteran's translator and plant picked up their words. They were not celebrating the victory. They were talking about how they could have ended it faster. He felt a tight knot form in his stomach. He had seen bravery, desperation, and even madness in war before, but this was different. This was rage, but it was not wild or uncontrolled. It was sharp, directed, and unstoppable. And the most unsettling thing of all was that this had only been a small skirmish, not the true fight. If this was what humans looked like in a minor battle, he could not imagine what they would be like when something truly pushed them to their limits. As the sun dipped low and the sky turned darker, the veteran made a note in his report for his commanders. His words were simple, but he wrote them with care, because they carried a warning. "Do not mistake human calm for weakness," he wrote. "And never, under any circumstance, be the one to make them angry." The war observer could not stop thinking about what he had seen. He had been assigned to countless campaigns across the stars, had watched elite soldiers from a dozen species fight and die. But humans were different. They fought with a strange mix of fury and focus, something he had never encountered before. His commanders requested his first report, but he hesitated. How could he explain that the coalition's victory had not been the result of their grand strategy, but because a handful of humans had simply refused to stop? He sent only a short message for now. Observation: ongoing human combat methods require further study. The following day brought a new mission. A larger enemy force had been spotted near the eastern pass, a place where the terrain was steep and narrow. The coalition planned to use this to their advantage, creating a kill zone with long-range fire before the enemy could reach them. The observer was sent to the forward line to record human unit performance. He found the same squad from the previous day preparing their gear. They spoke in low voices, checking each other's weapons and armor. There was no nervousness in their faces. Instead, there was a strange stillness, like hunters before the hunt. When the enemy appeared, the plan was simple: hold fire until the commander's signal. But once again, the humans reacted in their own way. They obeyed the order to wait, but when the signal came, they moved like they had been released from chains. Their weapons roared, and the first enemy ranks crumbled. The observer noticed something unsettling. The humans adjusted instantly to any change. If their rifles jammed, they switched to sidearms or blades without hesitation. If they were pinned down, they didn't wait for backup. They flanked the enemy on their own. It was as if they could not stand the idea of being passive for even a moment. Then, mid-battle, something happened that changed the observer's understanding completely. A human soldier, small compared to the others, was hit by a blast that tore through his armor. He collapsed, unmoving. The squad leader froze for only half a second, then his entire body changed. His movements became faster, more aggressive, every shot more precise. The rest of the squad mirrored him instantly, their firepower doubling, their attacks pushing the enemy back at a frightening pace. The observer realized they were no longer fighting for position or advantage. They were fighting for revenge. The enemy line began to crumble under the pressure. It was not chaotic rage, it was cold, calculated destruction. Every enemy who had been near the fallen human was targeted first. The observer's heart pounded as he recorded the moment, knowing he had never seen anything like it before. Enemy commander tried to rally his troops, but fear was spreading among them. Soldiers stumbled, weapons shook in their hands, and some even turned to run. The humans gave them no chance to regroup. Within minutes, the pass was littered with broken armor and scorched ground. The surviving enemy forces scattered, chased into the wilderness by relentless fire. After the battle, the observer approached the squad leader. His armor was dented, his visor cracked, and blood streaked his gloves, but his eyes were calm again. The observer asked him why the squad's fighting had changed so suddenly after the soldier fell. The human simply stared at him for a moment, then said, "We don't leave debts unpaid." That was all. No further explanation. That night, at camp, the observer replayed the combat footage over and over. The moment the soldier went down, the change in the squad had been instant, like a switch had been thrown. It was not adrenaline alone. He had seen many species fueled by adrenaline. This was something deeper, something that made the humans more dangerous the more they had to lose. In his second report to his commanders, he finally wrote the truth. Human combat behavior changes under emotional triggers. Loss of an ally produces a measurable increase in coordination, aggression, and precision. This is not a breakdown of discipline. It is an amplification of it. Recommend further observation and extreme caution. He hesitated before sending it, but deep inside, he already knew the truth. Whatever force drove the humans in battle was not something any strategy could prepare for. And if the enemy ever learned how to trigger it, the war would become something far darker. The next mission came sooner than anyone expected. Enemy scouts had been spotted moving through the southern valley, a wide stretch of broken ground filled with abandoned bunkers from an older war. The coalition saw an opportunity to ambush them, and the human squad was chosen to lead the push. The observer insisted on accompanying them, determined to understand the strange force that drove them. He stayed close this time, moving behind their formation as they advanced under the pale light of the twin moons. The bunkers loomed like silent graves, their walls cracked, the air heavy with the scent of dust and old metal. The humans moved, quietly, their armor making barely a sound. There was no chatter, no wasted motion. It reminded the observer of predators stalking prey. When contact came, it was sudden and violent. Enemy troops emerged from the shadows, weapons firing in sharp bursts. The humans returned fire without hesitation, spreading out and taking cover. The observer expected the same wild aggression he had seen before, but something was different. This time, there was no shouting, no rage-filled charges. Their movements were calm, almost too calm. They advanced steadily, every shot placed with precision. The enemy fell back step by step, unable to match their pace. The observer realized this was not the fury of a cornered fighter, this was the patience of a hunter. He watched the squad leader give a series of hand signals, barely visible in the dim light. The squad shifted positions in perfect silence, cutting off the enemy's escape routes one by one. There was no rush, no desperation, only certainty. A lone enemy tried to break away from the fight, sprinting through a side corridor. 2. Humans moved to intercept, their rifles lowering as they closed in. They didn't fire. They caught him instead, dragging him to the ground. One quick strike ended the struggle, and they moved on without a word. The observer felt his skin crawl. This was not how most soldiers fought. This was how predators ended a hunt. After nearly 20 minutes of relentless advance, the enemy force was gone. Every last one accounted for. The humans regrouped in a wide chamber at the center of the bunker complex. They checked their weapons, patched their armor, and exchanged quiet nods. It was as if the fight had been nothing more than routine. The observer, still unsettled, finally spoke. Earlier, in the last battle, you fought like you were on fire. Today it was different. Why? The squad leader glanced at him, his face unreadable behind the visor. Fire burns fast, he said simply. But when you carry it inside, it lasts longer. The other humans seemed to understand immediately. No one else explained. That night, the observer stayed awake in his tent, listening to the faint sounds of the camp. The humans were nearby, laughing softly among themselves. He tried to make sense of the words, fire inside, lasting longer. It dawned on him that what he had seen before had been only one face of human rage, the wild charge, the overwhelming assault. That was when their emotions erupted all at once. But this cold, methodical hunting was the other face. It was rage that had learned patience. Rage that didn't need to shout. Rage that could wait as long as it had to before. Striking, he realized with a chill, that such control made them even more dangerous. A burst of anger could be avoided, delayed, or outlasted. But a quiet, patient fury could follow you for days, weeks, even years, waiting for the moment to strike. In his next report to his commanders, he wrote, "Humans do not simply become aggressive. When provoked, they change. They can channel their emotions into immediate violence or into slow, precise elimination. In either form, the result is the same. The enemy falls." As he finished the report, a messenger came to his tent. Another battle was coming, and this time the enemy was ready for the humans. They had studied the footage, learned their tactics, and planned a counterstrike. The observer felt his chest tighten. If the enemy truly understood what humans could do, this could be the most dangerous fight yet. And for the first time in his long career, he wasn't sure whether to fear for the humans, or for those who stood against them. The morning was colder than usual, the sky a pale silver that made the camp feel unnaturally quiet. The observer could sense it in the air. The enemy was planning something. Orders came in before sunrise. The coalition's forward position was under threat, and all units were to prepare for immediate deployment. The human squad moved with quiet efficiency, checking weapons and tightening armor straps. There was no nervous energy, no rushing, only the stillness that came before violence. The observer stayed close to them as they boarded the transport, the hum of the engines filling the silence. The battlefield was different this time. Instead of open ground or narrow passes, they were facing a broken city, its ruins stretching for kilometers. It was the perfect place for an ambush. The coalition commander's plan was straightforward: hold the defensive line and wait for the enemy to exhaust themselves before pushing back. But the observer noticed something unusual in the intelligence briefing. The enemy had gathered an unusually high number of psychological warfare units. They weren't just coming to fight, they were coming to break morale. When the first wave hit, the air filled not just with weapons fire, but with sound. The enemy's speakers blared harsh, guttural voices, broadcasting messages in dozens of languages, threats, insults, and worse, personal details about captured soldiers, promises of what would be done to them. The observer saw the effect. Immediately on some coalition troops, hesitation, unsteady aim. The fear of what those words meant. The enemy's mistake was assuming humans would react the same way. Instead, something shifted in the squad. Their movements became sharper, their pace quicker. The squad leader gave no loud orders, just a single motion of his hand, and the humans began advancing. Ignoring the defensive plan entirely, they cut through the rubble, using every broken wall for cover, hunting the source of the broadcasts. The observer followed, his pulse quickening. They found the first speaker tower behind a collapsed building. 2 humans slipped forward, disabling the guards in seconds. One of them pulled the speaker down, smashing it against the ground until it was nothing but scrap. The enemy had set up more, hidden across the city, but the humans treated each one like a personal target. With every tower they destroyed, their attacks grew more aggressive. The enemy must have realized their tactic was failing because the broadcasts grew louder, more vicious. They played recordings of human prisoners screaming. The observer felt his stomach twist at the sound, but the humans didn't slow down. They became terrifyingly focused. There was no hesitation in their aim, no wasted motion. Every movement was direct, efficient, and final. Sight of one human soldier, blood streaking her cheek, as she calmly reloaded in the middle of incoming fire, not even flinching when debris exploded near her. It was as if the enemy had stopped being soldiers in her eyes. They were simply a problem to be removed. By the time the humans reached the final broadcast tower, the enemy was in full retreat. The squad leader walked up to the console, pressed a single button to cut the sound, and stood there for a moment in the sudden silence. The observer approached him, trying to understand. "They were trying to break you," he said. "It made you fight harder. Why?" The squad leader glanced at him and replied in a voice so calm it felt colder than any shout. They thought, "Fear is a weapon. They don't understand for us. It's fuel." When the battle ended, word spread quickly through the coalition lines. Other species began whispering about what they had seen, the humans marching into enemy fire, hunting down every speaker as if it was personal. Even soldiers who had once doubted them now avoided meeting their gaze. Fear, the observer realized, was spreading, but it wasn't the enemy's fear tactic anymore. It was fear of what humans became when someone tried to break them. That night, as the city smoldered in the distance, the observer filed his next report. The enemy attempted to weaken human resolve through psychological warfare. The result was the opposite. Their aggression, coordination, and effectiveness increased drastically. It is my belief that any attempt to manipulate human emotions in combat will only make them more lethal. Recommend all allied forces avoid using such methods even in training, lest they trigger something they cannot control. He knew the warning would go unheard. And the enemy had just learned the most dangerous lesson of all. They had seen what happens when humans take the fight personally. The war had shifted. The early days, the coalition had moved cautiously, relying on careful strategies and strict coordination between species. Now, more and more commanders were rewriting their battle plans with one clear point in common. The final push would be led by humans. The observer had seen it happening over the past weeks. At first, the humans had been treated like a curious addition to the war effort, an unpredictable but useful force. Now they were becoming the tip of the spear in every major assault. Victories were coming faster, but the cost was growing. The next mission was unlike any before. Intelligence reports showed the enemy's fortress on the northern ridge was the heart of their supply network. If it fell, the enemy's ability to fight would be crippled. The coalition prepared a massive offensive, but the observers and tacticians all quietly agreed it would be the humans who decided the outcome. The observer was assigned to march with them again, watching as they prepared for the assault. Their armor was battered, their weapons scratched from constant use, but their eyes were steady. They carried themselves like people who had accepted the cost before even stepping onto the battlefield. The approach to the fortress was brutal. The enemy rained fire from the high walls, the ground erupting in plumes of dirt and metal. Coalition soldiers fought bravely, but progress was slow, every step contested. Then the humans broke forward. It wasn't a wild charge, it was an unshakable advance. They moved from cover to cover, cutting down defenders with precise bursts, never stopping for more than a heartbeat. When a section of wall refused to fall to heavy fire, the humans planted explosives under the cover of darkness and blasted a hole wide enough for the coalition to pour through. The observer noticed something troubling. Between battles, the humans' movements were slower, their bodies carrying the weight of exhaustion. Their faces were pale, their armor stained with old blood. They were pushing themselves beyond what most species could endure, but they never spoke of rest. It was as if stopping, even for a moment, was more dangerous to them than the enemy's weapons. He recalled the stories in the archives. The records of ancient human wars that lasted decades, even centuries, fought without cease. He began to wonder if this war would end for them only when the enemy no longer existed. Inside the fortress, the fighting turned savage. Narrow corridors turned into killing zones, grenades and blasts echoing through the stone halls. The humans led every breach, every flank, every push. Other coalition units followed their lead without hesitation, no longer questioning their orders, not because of rank, but because the humans had shown time and again that wherever they went, victory followed. The enemy's resistance began to collapse. The fortress' central command chamber fell after an intense 30-minute battle, the humans clearing the room with calculated, silent efficiency. When it was over, the coalition celebrated. Messages poured in from across the front lines, calling the victory a turning point in the war. But the observer didn't feel the same relief. As he watched the humans silently gather their gear and prepare to move out again, he saw the toll. It was taking on them not just in their bodies, but in their eyes. There was a distance there now, a coldness that hadn't been there in the early days. Later, when he tried to speak to the squad leader about rest, the human simply shook his head. "Rest comes when the war ends," he said. The observer asked, "And if it doesn't end soon?" Squad leader gave a thin, humorless smile. "Then we make sure it ends." In his latest report, the observer wrote, "The coalition is becoming dependent on human forces for every decisive strike. This reliance is dangerous. The humans will not stop until the war is over, but I fear they may define over in ways the rest of us do not expect. Their endurance is both their greatest strength and a possible danger to the balance of this alliance." As night fell over the smoking ruins of the fortress, the observer watched the humans move out again, already heading toward the next fight. He had thought this war was reaching its final stages, but now he was certain of one thing: if the humans ever decided this war was personal, nothing in the galaxy would be able to stand in their way. The dawn was unnaturally quiet, the kind of silence that felt like the world was holding its breath. The observer awoke to the sound of distant thunder, but it wasn't the weather, it was orbital bombardment. The enemy had made their move. Coalition scouts came running through the camp, shouting that the forward human base, the one deep in enemy territory, had been hit from above. No survivors were expected. The news spread like a shockwave. Most soldiers reacted with disbelief, some with fear, but the humans, they didn't speak at all. The observer saw them gathering in the center of the camp, silent as they checked their weapons. No one gave them orders. No one needed to. Their faces were blank, but their eyes carried a stillness that made even allied veterans step back. The squad leader looked at the burning horizon and then at his team. He didn't shout, didn't rally them. He simply said, "We're going." The coalition commander tried to hold them back, saying it was too dangerous, that the enemy fleet was still overhead. The squad leader didn't argue. He just walked past and the rest followed. The observer, against every instinct, followed too. The march to the ruins of the forward base felt endless. The air was thick with ash, the ground trembling from distant impacts. When they arrived, the observer wished he hadn't come. The base was gone, nothing left but twisted metal and scorched earth. Were here and there. Pieces of shattered armor lay among the rubble.
Ow.
The humans moved through it slowly, not saying a word. They didn't search for survivors. They already knew there were none. One soldier knelt beside a fragment of armor with a familiar insignia, resting his hand on it for a long moment before standing again. No tears, no outcry, just a quiet that felt heavier than the smoke. Then they turned toward the enemy lines. What followed was not a charge, not even a coordinated assault. It was something beyond either. The humans moved like a storm, advancing faster than the observer had ever seen, firing with deadly precision. They didn't waste a single shot. They didn't slow when wounded. They didn't stop when the enemy broke and fled. They followed, relentless. The enemy's fortified positions crumbled one after another. Attempts to regroup were crushed before they began. Even orbital support couldn't slow them down. The humans fought as if the concept of retreat had been erased from their minds. The observer had fought in more wars than most could imagine, but nothing had prepared him for this. He saw a human run out of ammunition and simply pick up an enemy weapon without breaking stride. Saw another, bleeding from a deep wound, push forward to shield a comrade without hesitation. Every movement was efficient, every strike final. The enemy commanders tried to pull their forces back to regroup, a fatal mistake. The humans pursued them across open ground, through trenches, and into fortified bunkers. There was nowhere to hide. By the time the sky darkened with smoke and fire, the battle was no longer a battle. It was an erasure. The enemy lines were gone, their strongholds reduced to ruins. The observer watched from a distance as the humans stood among the wreckage, breathing hard but already scanning for the next target. Their armor was cracked, their bodies bruised and bloodied, but not one of them had fallen. That night, the observer sat alone to write his final report. His hands shook as he typed. "I have seen many wars," he began. "I have seen armies rise and fall, civilizations burn, and worlds reduced to dust. But what I saw today was not war. It was something older, something primal. When humans lose their own, they do not simply seek victory, they seek ending. They will burn the sky if they must, and they will not stop until the enemy is gone. This is not strategy. This is extinction." When he looked up from his report, he saw the humans sitting together in silence, their faces lit by the glow of distant fires. None of them looked satisfied. None of them looked at peace. They were simply waiting, not for orders, but for the next fight. And in that moment, the observer understood the truth. The war might end for the coalition, but for the humans, it would never truly be over.